Okay, I'll just continue with the mic now. As I was saying, he served as Professor Director of the Area Studies Center, and prior to that was Associate Professor in the Department of International Relations, Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, for nearly 22 years. He was Professor of Pakistan Studies at Columbia University, New York, for 3 years, from 1991 to 1994. He took a Fulbright Fellowship at Wake Forest University, 1997 to 1998. Rockefeller Foundation Fellowship in International Relations at the University of California, Berkeley, 1985. Oh, I think that would be 1986. Am I right, sir? 84, 85, I'm sorry. There's a misprint here. He is the author of War Without Winners, Afghanistan's Uncertain Transition After the Cold War, printed by Oxford University Press in 1996. Indian Ocean and the Superpowers, Economic, Political and Strategic Perspectives, published by Croom, Helm, London, 1986, and editor of State, Society and Democratic Change in Pakistan, also published by Oxford University Press in 1997. He has published widely in professional journals on political and security issues pertaining to South Asia, the Indian Ocean, and Afghanistan. Thank you.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Actually, my introduction is not that important because I'm not going to speak, I'm going to raise some questions and facilitate this interaction among the panelists as well as between the panelists and the audience here. Let me introduce very briefly the panelists for this session. On my right, I have Zubaida Jalal, a very famous civil society activist and a contributor to social development in Baluchistan. And in recognition of her work, she was appointed Minister of Education in the federal government in the early years of Pervez Musharraf. She is engaged in the social issues of Baluchistan and continues to live in that part of the country. Then we have Nahid Asfar. She lives in Karachi, but she is one of the very few individuals who are interested in understanding culture of Baluchistan, particularly through textile designs, through jewelry. I mean, culture is not just simply music. I'll explain as I go on that culture is something extremely important. And I'm glad that Nahid Asfar is engaged with understanding Baluchistan through culture, and she will be sharing her experiences with us today. Then on my left I have very young historian Yaqub Bangash. I had the opportunity to meet him and several times during past 1 or 2 years. He is teaching at former Christian College, which also is a university, and the kind of subjects that he is exploring, primarily national identity, state building, and then shifting his work and focus, although Baluchistan has been part of his doctoral research as well, but now he is specifically focusing on Kalat state. So again, a great contribution to understanding what Pakistan is, because Pakistan is nothing except the provincial units that we have. So therefore we understand Pakistan, that will require understanding the cultures, the histories, the diversities, the pluralism, the ethnicities, the politics, the societies of the constituent elements of Pakistan. Before I start raising questions, I would like to to remind this audience as well as the panelists, and that is with the purpose, this reminder that Pakistan as a whole is unexplored, unresearched country. And within Pakistan, Baluchistan is totally ignored in terms of research. Research is not that you just go and write few articles or one book on conflict, war, this tribe, that tribe. Research is much deeper and it requires for the anthropologists living in that country, for a sociologist being a part of that society while doing the research, for a historian digging out archival material. While we were preparing for this panel, Zubaida Jalal and Bangash told me that the archival material about Baluchistan's history, society, economic development, tribe, almost every aspect of its life is buried under the files. And nobody really cares about the archives in Quetta, which sit somewhere in the darkness of some office in the commissioner's office. So we would particularly like to ask our younger generation and younger scholars who are aspiring to be in the universities or do some research at doctoral level or beyond that, that there is a wealth of knowledge about Afghanistan, about Baluchistan that needs to be discovered and refined and processed and understood and explained to the world. I think this is our collective duty as scholars of humanities and social sciences in Pakistan, that we are focused on larger issues of world politics, national politics, and we are not looking at the society, culture, and local processes. The first question, the format is that I will raise few questions, and each panelist will answer that question, and I don't think that I am the only expert here to raise questions. We will also give you an opportunity to raise questions about Baluchistan so that this session is more meaningful and more interactive. The first question that I have in my mind is that how you understand Baluchistan in terms of cultural pluralism, diversity, ethnic groups, their histories, their sub-identities. Because the image that you get about Sindh or about Punjab or about Khyber Pakhtunkhwa or about Baluchistan or even Gilgit-Baltistan, that they are a single cultural or historical unit. The social fact that many of the analysts try to ignore is that each province in this country is multi-ethnic, multilinguistic, multicultural. And I take diversity as a student of history and politics. I take diversity as richness, as beautiful colors of the rainbow. And also, my understanding of politics is that unless we understand that beauty of the richness of these different colors and shades, not only at the national level, but also within each province of Pakistan, we will be missing out a lot. Because a kind of unitary thinking that has dominated Pakistani social and political discourses is that why isn't that we don't have a single national identity? Why isn't that we are not all Pakistanis? We are all Pakistanis, as they are all Americans, they are all Englishmen, they are all Indians. But within that, there are layered diversities and ethnicities. Therefore, a nuanced proper and realistic understanding of Baluchistan must start with how you understand Baluchistan in terms of its being a composite culture, identity, and diversity. So I'll start with Zubaida, who has grown up and has lived all her life in Baluchistan. So with you, and then I will ask Nahid to answer this question with reference to our beautiful work that she is doing on giving to the rest of Pakistan and to the world the cultural trends in textile and jewelry about Baluchistan, and then I'll come to Bangash.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's working. Bismillah ar-Rahman
I don't
ar-Rahim.
trust this hotel.
Technology, huh? Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much for this opportunity. And Raisa, I'd prefer maybe this one because otherwise you keep bending. Anyway, thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum. As I think Raisa very elaborately and very sort of in detail started this topic about Baluchistan. Being a Baloch and coming from a tribe, a predominant tribe, Rind, myself, and then married into the Kurd tribe, I'd elaborate a little bit on the whole issue of unity and diversity and, the beautiful colors of Baluchistan, I would say. We started the theme itself, I mean the name for this group, Song of the Falcon. I think many of you would know that this was a book by Maxim Gorky, and the short story that he had written just shows, starts with the difference or the diversity between two animals or a bird and an animal. And then by the end, the death and what it all meant to the falcon and to the snake. A very short story, but in the end, it's all about a dream of freedom, of diversity, and the beauty of it all. So it really connects with Baluchistan itself. Baluchistan, as we all know, is a diverse province. Historically, we've had the predominant ethnic groups, the Pakhtun, the Baloch, and we have the Hazara community. We have the settlers, as we call them, Urdu-speaking, Punjabi, and even many of the Balochs which live on the Sindh border, linguistically and otherwise the language. You have the Sindhi-speaking Balochs also across border. So, in just by looking at it, just a general look of it will show you what Baluchistan is about, how diverse and how multicultural and multi-ethnic, different languages, even Persian speaking, whether it's Hazaras or the Dehwar tribe in Mastung are basically Persian speaking communities. Through the ages, history, I think Yaqub would be able to give specific dates and times better than me. But as a Baloch, I see that through this diversity, we have learned to respect diversity, to be tolerant. That is how we grow up, with different people, as you would say. So Baluchistan otherwise is a province where you'll find a lot of respect, a lot of tolerance for different people. In spite of what, unfortunately, we have been seeing in the last 2, 3, 4 years, but traditionally this is what Baloch people are. Hospitality, you would be knowing the kind of hospitality there is. We do have the differences of classes still, but otherwise equality as human beings. The region that I come from, Akran, I'll just take a few minutes on that. is that it's a predominantly Baloch area. We don't have the Brahvi speaking also there. But then we have different tribes, we have different classes, but then we don't have the feudal system. So as a Baloch from Makran, I have an upper hand in the sense that I'm equal with all my fellows, whether women or men, compared to maybe some parts of Baluchistan, central Baluchistan I would say, because we do have the Nawab and feudal system in some parts of Baluchistan, but not in Makran. So it gives me a better, sort of, as a human being, a better level of equating myself with whoever is around me. Maybe if that would be sufficient, and then we could,
we'll
go on,
take
take more
more questions.
questions later. I'd ask Nahid to,
Thank you.
as an outsider,
Thank you.
outsider,
Yes, inside or outside.
outsider to talk about.
Well,
Close.
in terms of the costumes and in terms of the culture, which is the embroidery, this is actually has been my focus in study that I am involved in, right? And during my travels, because I've traveled quite extensively in Baluchistan, one of the most interesting facets that came through as I was delving closer and closer into different areas, different motifs, different embroidery styles, kaun kahan, kis tarah kadhai karta hai, what are the names of the motifs and so on. After a significant amount of time, I think maybe a couple of years, the whole thing started falling into place. That there is a huge diversity of designs, of motifs, of the use of color, of technique. And that, on the whole, you see, we who are not from Baluchistan, we tend to give a general look to a Baloch costume, that it has to have a front, it should have a pocket, it should have this or that embroidery. Within that, there is a huge sort of almost 180-degree range. While preserving the core Baloch identity, and you can look at a costume and say, yes, this is from Baluchistan, but the entire spectrum is huge. I think, yes, they will be coming through in a short while. For instance, as far as the book is concerned, I have tried to divide it into 4 areas of basic stylistic design. One is connected to Western Baluchistan, where the differences of embroidery between Mand and Panchgur and Kech and Haran are quite obvious. But the basic grid, as it were, is the same. The basic technique is the same. But now, with a great deal of great many roads, a lot more media attention, a lot more access to education, to many of those typical designs that I started my research with, and I'm still looking for each area or each tribe of Baluchistan, what was in fact the most typical of that particular group. That is changing a great deal. Even during my research, I've realized that things are changing very, very fast. And while at one time there was a clear difference, you could look at a costume and we're still trying to do that, and we have succeeded in doing it, that this is from Makran, or this is from Haran, or this is from Kalat, or Sibi, or whatever. It is now becoming, is melding together. A certain a certain sort of unitary kind of Baloch identity is coming through. So, and it is enriched by the diversity of the motifs. The same is also actually true of the jewelry. There are many pieces of jewelry, many shapes, many designs, which are which are used in different parts of Balochistan in different ways. You can say it's a talk. This is from Kalat. This is from eastern Balochistan. In western Balochistan, they don't wear the talk. Then you can look at another piece of ear jewelry and say, okay, this is from the Mari tribe. This is from the Pashtun belt. But the shape will be, the basic core shape will be the same. And yet within that, there will be a huge sort of, I won't say huge, but there will be significant diversion of motifs and designs. For instance, you know, this is a typical piece of jewelry that is worn in Kalat and by the Brahmins, and it is worn below the neck opening, and it is a carry with you grooming kit. And there is space in there for perfume, there is space in there for, you know, cleaning your teeth and so on. Then this is, these are all pieces from Makran, and the names are written there. These are all typical of Makran, but many of them are used in different parts of Baluchistan.
No, you know, you can look at the beauty. This is the artwork that has been going on for centuries, and it has got the knowledge and the learning and the cultural heritage of the centuries. But imagine that if the researchers from within Baluchistan or the researchers from outside Baluchistan not really go out the way Ahid has done and dig out, take pictures, work with people and present to the world, that beauty and that richness remains buried in the time. I think that this is an invitation for all of you who might be interested to explore Pakistani culture, Pakistani institutions, Pakistani heritage. As I mentioned earlier, that is nothing except what is happening on the ground, the constituent elements of Pakistan. Bangash is a historian, so he will give us a historical, political take on the diversity in Baluchistan.
Thank you, Dr. Rais. I just thought that I'm sure, as my colleagues here have given a wonderful description of Baloch culture, and I just thought I'll sort of quickly go over the complicated nature of Balochistan and actually show how diverse and actually how complicated the whole place is. And if I could just preface it by saying that when I was doing my doctoral research, and I wrote it on all the princely states of Pakistan and how did they become a part of Pakistan, it was Kalat that actually took ages for me to figure out, because I couldn't even figure out how it was governed. And I found this fascinating series of files in the British Library in London where they were trying to understand how Kalat worked, at least administratively. And the files begin in 1870, and I reached up till 1929, and in 1929 there's this fascinating minute from the Foreign Secretary of India, and he says that anyone who ever tries to understand Balochistan completely will fail in doing so because it's so diverse. And he actually quotes previous British people who actually tried to analyze this and define it in one way, and they just couldn't do it. So they said that maybe by the end of it we should try and understand it in a myriad of ways and understand it's really a place that is put together through diversity. In a lot of ways, you know, parallel to how we cannot understand perhaps Afghanistan through a singular lens. And I just thought that thankfully your presentation actually began with a map. So just to use the map and just quickly show how interesting the place is. So if you just look at this, this is from Imperial Gazetteer of India 1909, if I'm not mistaken. And this shows the division of what Balochistan looked like. This bit is what is called British Balochistan. So this is what Britain got out of the Afghan wars. So this was initially a part of Afghanistan. And then you have the Baloch part, which is this area. So half of it actually is in India, is in Iran, because when the British set the boundary between the Indian Empire and Iran, the Baloch in effect got divided between Iran and British India. And with the Baloch, you have the Barawis, who haven't been mentioned as yet, but there is a strong alliance between the Baloch and the Barawi, but the Barawis are actually a different race. And if you all sort of, remember your sort of early school history, Barawis are the link to the Dravidians, they have the Dravidian language. And some scholars would argue that they were the ancient residents of the area. So they are very much linked to people in South India, and their language is very different too. And then you can come towards the north, the other pink bit, and that is also, that's the Pakhtun area. So you have in what you call Baluchistan a Pakhtun area, which is now of course an integral part of it. And then if you look on the other side of the border towards the south is Sindh. Now you have lots of Sindhis who are, people who live in Sindh who are actually Baloch. So the Talpos, who actually ruled northern Sindh, are a Baloch tribe. The Zardaris, for that matter, are a Baloch tribe. So you actually have the Baloch all throughout the region, and even in the place that we call Baluchistan, they are not the only ethnic group. So there's this fascinating mixture of the Baloch, the Barawis, the Pakhtuns, you've got the Hazaras, and you've got all these other kinds of people that are sort of mixed up in this area. And historically, this land has only been governed by one government for a very short period of time. We don't know all the history of Baluchistan, sadly, because of a lack of documentation. But what we do know is that something like a state developed in Kalat in the 17th century, in the middle of the 17th century, which tried to bring together these tribes into some form of government. Now, because it was a very tribal-based government, you did not end up with a unitary state, and you ended up with a fascinating form of government, which was not a federation, but not a confederacy. And the last time I tried to actually define it in one sentence, I wrote that it was sort of a multi-layered federal republic, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But that's the nearest you could go towards it, because you have and forward from this, there's actually some pictures of the Khan of Kalat, Sumir Nasir, who actually founded the dynasty, and then you have the last. If you go a couple forward, yeah. So Ahmad Yar Khan was the last ruling prince of Kalat, and this was sort of the first person who actually brought together Baluchistan under one government, Nasir Khan the First. And it's fascinating because Ahmad Yar Khan was not complete autocratic ruler. He ruled through the tribes. He was very much a feudal leader there. But then he had his own lands where he was actually the sovereign. Even the idea of sovereignty and who actually controls the land and the people is a very complicated factor. So by the end of it, I just sort of close on this point, is that I think the reason why we do not currently understand Baluchistan is the fact that we just don't understand what's happening there. And the attempt is not even being made. One point that I'd really like to highlight is that I was in some ways pleased that the British, at least for 30-40 years, tried to understand it and tried to engage with it. By the end of it, some of them just gave up. But that's something that we do not find any longer in the Pakistani polity, that we just don't try to understand the great diversity of the region and then engage with it and try to see how in that diversity we can create a state that can hold together. I think that's the key that we need to look for. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I have two brief questions to the panelists, then we will open up for your questions as well. My first question is about society itself. We talk about diversity in terms of culture and history, but society in a sense that, is there any civil society in Baluchistan? What has been the character of that civil society, to what extent it has evolved and has become active as an emerging civil society in Sindh, in Karachi, and other parts of the country, in Punjab, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the status of the civil society and the society at large, and particularly you examine it in the context of this background of history and diversity of culture and the evolution, if any, that has taken place since the independence of the country. Where does society at large, and particularly the role of the civil society in a larger diverse society of Baluchistan is today?
Historically, as we know, and most of the maybe participants have read, the whole, not the whole history, but otherwise something about Baluchistan. You may have heard of the Jirga system, or where the elders or notables, as we call them, sardars and mirs, would normally have their own sort of setups where it wasn't a platform for decision making only, but a lot of social work would also be part of that platform, where people would be looking after their own communities in good times or bad times. And I find that maybe historically a role that the jirgas or the elders have played always, traditionally, in different tribes and different communities and societies. But a more specific answer to the civil society sort of setup in Baluchistan, it all started evolving, and we have a real, I would say, a strength in Baluchistan at different levels in the early 90s. For instance, my own experience, I would like to share that with the audience, is in 1982, when my family decided to start the first girls' school in our area, where we had no government schools also, and that's, I'm talking of the 20th century. So we started that one school, and it evolved as a community sort of participation where, my father, who had the vision or took the leadership, deciding that education is as important for women as it is for men. Education does not mean getting a job, but as a human being, you evolve into becoming a better human being just by being educated. And that is the whole sense, and that's how it came about. And so in 1982 was the time when we first started, and there were lots of people coming in, whether it's World Bank or others, to study, the community participation aspect of it. That is how later on in the early 80s, I would say, institutions of civil society organizations, or as we would call them earlier, non-government organizations came into being. So it's not that it's all as institutions, but still we have what we would call community-based organizations, where it's not a sort of I would say a room or a constructive kind of thing, but actually people and young youth and young boys and girls getting together and wanting to do something for the area that they're living in. So it's since then it has evolved. We do have the presence of civil society in Baluchistan, in all parts of Baluchistan.
Nahid, I would like you to give us some personal account of the household, the men and the women during the time of your research, visits to Baluchistan. You have been able to gather, because the images that come about or out of Baluchistan is that there are wild men killing women on the basis of honor. We'll talk about that question later on. This kind of demonization that goes on about particularly tribal societies who are more civilized, less civilized. To give us your own personal, as a researcher, your own account of what kind of Baluchi women and men and society you have interacted with.
Okay, so here is the core Baluch hospitality incident that I can recount which happened to myself and to girls who work with me. One day we found ourselves quite late in the evening in an area which I did not know about, but which was apparently considered extremely dangerous. Now, since we are completely and totally focused on our research, we couldn't find the house that we were looking for, and we just knocked on the door, or in fact didn't even knock on the door, almost barged in. And as we came in, the hostess saw these 4 women, and we went in saying, you know, please show us your clothes, and we want to talk about embroidery, and we want to do this, that, and the other. And she was so calm, she was so gracious. It was almost like she's used to strange women coming into a house in the middle of an evening and wanting to see her clothes. I mean, how many of us would be able to deal with that with any aplomb? But there she was, completely calm. Then, and she went around and she asked us whether we wanted tea. She made us sit down. They took out the charpais, put it in the courtyard, and she started bringing out the clothes. And as time passed, we realized that it is getting now very dark. There were no radio signals, no cell signals, and that our car had broken down. And there was absolutely no way that that car could be fixed, or that we could go back, and or to send a message to Zubeda, in fact, with whom I was staying, that you know, we are stuck in this place and this is what has happened to us. So send us a rescue car. But anyway, it's a long story. Eventually, what happened was absolutely phenomenal. The tribe that we had gone to, whose house we had gone to, was having a blood feud, and several murders had taken place, several killings had taken place between them and another tribe, who were their neighbors and who are traditionally old enemies. Now, this was a new spate of killing, and these numbers are always counted. You know, how many dead on this side, how many dead on that side. Anyhow, what was so incredible was that these people, who we were guests now, and to a Baloch, a guest is the most honored object of his household. This man, this group actually, contacted their enemies and said, look, we will not attack them because they are our guests. You take them with you and reach them to safety. This is about Baloch hospitality. It's about us. And would you believe it that, and women, we were driven in the enemy's car to a place where Zubayda's car could meet us, and then we went home. Can anybody imagine this? So this is Baluchistan.
Another time, before I ask question about Baloch nationalism and Baloch aspirations, because they are very much in the media, I will ask Yakub Bangash to give his take on how does he read the Baloch aspiration or aspirations. Before that, I come from a Baloch-dominated region of southern Punjab, where majority of the people speak Balochi language. And part of that is in my culture, my name, my identity as well. There is a village that is called Rasulpur in my district. That village is of entire Balochi or a Balochi tribe. And these Balochi men and women migrated because of conflict in Baluchistan, which is next door. Rasulpur is a very distinguished place in Pakistan where each man and women is a graduate. Now, we look at success stories here and there, but, and I tell you, this is not a village of 15, 20 people. Hundreds of households, and among them, you see doctors, engineers, lawyers, professors, teachers, everybody is literate and educated. Baloch. So, what really matters in social development, in human development, is opportunity. And it's not in the Baloch gene or Pashtun gene to be fighting and dying. It is basically the social opportunity as you provide them. They will do the same miraculous things that other human beings have done elsewhere. Bangladesh, this is an explosive question. And of course, there's a lot of passion, a lot of emotionalism, a lot of politics. But a candid view, frank, and a take of a historian.
Thanks a lot. Well, I'll try and give the 2-minute version of this, which I think also will reflect on what a civil society is, because I think that, a civil society in any place is in different stages of development. So I don't think we should judge by what's happening in Baluchistan, by what we see in Karachi or what we see in Lahore. Let's look at development in that place. And there, I think, fits the whole idea of Baloch nationalism. I'll just point out a couple of things, and of course the whole narrative is pretty long, and I'm writing another book on this actually. But I'll just point out a couple of things. The first thing, which I think is essential to understand the Baloch, is what Sir Robert Sandman said in the 1870s, is that honor the Baloch. I think that for them is a very critical thing. As long as you give them... Well, yes, and also, I didn't say the other bit of what the thing said, but because that's all the Pakhtun. In some ways true, I should say. Anyways, let's not go there. So honor the Baloch, something else the Pashtun, but anyways. And I think that thing is very critical, and I think that in some senses remains the core of the problem now. That if you actually engage with the Baloch and honor them and say, right, we want to make a deal with you, we want you to remain in Pakistan, and we admit our past mistakes, but let's create a new consensus where you can be a full and effective part of the new civil society and the new form of government, they will get on board. It's just the fact that they are not being honored, the wrongs are not being recognized and accepted, that they are reluctant to actually throw in their lot with Pakistan. And I'll just give you an example of why that's very significant. In the 1930s, there was a very important party that came up, the Kalat State National Party, established in 1937. And initially when I looked at it, I just thought, oh, some random party, composed of feudals and all this, that and the rest. But when I actually researched on this, I realized all of them were again educated. They were all educated mostly in British India. And if you look at their thinking, and if you look at what they were actually talking about in the context of Baluchistan, it's really fascinating. And I'll just sort of give you a short idea of what they thought. Now, the Khan of Kalat had actually developed a form of parliament in 1947, a House of Commons and a House of Lords. And there was this big debate in the House of Commons of the state of Kalat that should it become a part of Pakistan or not. And see, here again, it's 1947, and the Khan of Kalat, the ruler, actually says, well, this is, my parliament is going to decide if you're going to join Pakistan or not. And of course, the Khan had lots of friends in there, and perhaps it would not have done anything that the Khan wouldn't do, but the fact of the matter is that he did actually give them the onus to decide. And whatever type of representation was there, it was in some ways representative of what was happening in the Baloch areas at that time. And it is this fascinating discussion when they're talking about, oh, we should join Pakistan if it's a Muslim country. And Ghausbaksh Bizinjo, who was the leader of the house at that time and later a very active politician in Balochistan, said that, okay, well, why does Pakistan want us to join? And actually, well, someone's father, who's in the audience here, was there and said, well, because Pakistan is a Muslim country, so you must join. And Ghausbaksh Bizinjo replied to him and said, well, but then Iran is a Muslim country, Afghanistan is a Muslim country, so why not they join Pakistan? And if that happens, we are very free to join Pakistan. And then he went on to elaborate that, Baloch culture and Baloch traditions are different, and why can't we be friendly with Pakistan? So they actually offered a treaty of friendship and cooperation rather than all-out accession. And that, in effect, threw Pakistan in confusion, because, in effect, there was no answer to it. So this is really October and December 1947 thinking, that they are thinking actually in terms of identity. So that means that there is a developing civil society there. You know, people are thinking, and this Gosbaksh Bizinjo was not a Sardar, was not the Nawab of a tribe or the other. So these are the, you know, ground level people. And, you know, the House of Commons there was actually composed of the commons. They were the people who were being represented there. So you have the Sardar's view in the House of Lords, but then you have the people's view in the House of Commons, and that in some ways was the nascent civil society that was being developed, which sadly got crushed in effect by the government of Pakistan in years, because they were scared that, you know, Kalat is going to secede and all these other kinds of things. So I think, you know, coming back to, you know, what can be done is the fact that, you know, if you just honor them and actually treat them equally and give them their rights, I think, and I really, you know, I'm sure Zubaida Jalal can talk about it more, but I really think that they will become a part of the new national discourse in Pakistan if given the opportunity to be a full participant in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to open up the floor for discussion, and any question from the audience? Okay, questions should be very brief so that we accommodate more. Please.
Sir, my question is, how do we integrate the Baloch people, especially the tribes like the Mari tribe, the Bukti tribe, those who have their grievances into the national mainstream? Because if I mean, getting my university education in Pakistan, the only people from Baluchistan I got into contact with were Hazaras or Punjabis settled over there. So these people, they don't actually represent the Baloch people, that is the Buktis and the Maris in the national mainstream. And if I'm not digressing, the second part of the question is the recent package by the government enough to placate the grievances of the people, that is the Agas Kuke, Baluchistan? Apart from the panelists, I would also like Professor Rees to comment on that.
We will take 3 questions and then we will answer. Yes, sir. You want to ask questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Hakim Baloch, and I have some observation about the history and geography of Baluchistan.
If it is brief, we will accept that.
Okay, I don't talk.
We have 10 minutes.
Whatever you have, let me explain the thing.
Okay, go ahead.
This gentleman was not rightly projecting the geographia and the history of Baluchistan. So I don't know where from he has gathered all his literature. It was just one-sided. The first thing is this. For example, he said the British Baluchistan was annexed from Afghanistan, which is wrong. The Pashtun part of it was annexed from Afghanistan to make the British Baluchistan, but the Baluchistan part was never, including the Quetta city. So these distortions, these distortions continue in your minds, and you continue to represent, misrepresent Baluchistan, because you do not have the this thing, do not give the right to the people who really know Baluchistan and who are from the Baloch Peninsula. Secondly, you talk very much about the culture. One question which I may ask from Zubaida Jalal, that language is the cultural expression of a nation. When she was a federal minister, I personally requested her that you must give the right to the Baloch to be taught in their mother tongue. Thank you.
Okay, that question, please. Yes. Okay, go ahead. Women first.
My name is Sana Musharraf, and my question would be specifically directed either to Mr. Bhangash or Ms. Jalal. In a recent research, global research, Pakistan has been categorized as the 3rd most dangerous place to be as a woman to live in. And considering the Baloch society and the way they are governed, what is your opinion about the role of women, one, and secondly, about the rights women are given in terms of education and how they're being groomed, because they're giving it back to the society in the form of grooming the next generation. and eventually, the ultimate thing is maybe Ms. Jalal could add a little or give a little example of her own life, because what intrigues me most, that you coming from a so-called patriarchal society has been able to accomplish so much. How did you mellow down the resistance? I'm sure you must have faced the friction. Thank you very much.
Hakim Baloch Saab, a very respected, I would maybe not even have words to thank him, but he was the first commissioner, in fact, in Makran, and this was, I'm talking again of the late 80s or maybe early 90s, when there was an issue of land for the school, and he put his foot down and said, this is for the girls' school, and I don't have anything else to say. So, I mean, that's just a brief background that I gave of him. Otherwise, he's a literary person, a writer, historian in his own right. The question of the mother tongue in Baluchistan, I'd like to address that, and then I'll come back to you. So as I said, Quetta city is a diverse city. We have 5 languages there. Now the issue became as to which mother tongue in the classrooms. Should we have Pashto, Balochi, Brahvi, Sindhi, Punjabi, or Persian? And that became the challenge for us. But if you remember rightly, sir, we did have, when Nawab, Shahid Nawab Bukti was chief minister, and he decided to have Balochi as the, primary language in primary schools. But again became an issue and failed, because Bukti Balochi is different from Makrani Balochi. Now for us Makranis, we had to go for a training to even understand some of the Bukti Balochi words. So you see, that's a challenge, and we do have, I think in this festival, sir, we do have maybe... Yes, I know that, but I'm just... I know, sir, but the problem for Makranis was there, even with the Balochi. I'm not even talking about the other languages, but even with Balochi it became a problem. And it didn't succeed, because the books were made, the textbooks were introduced, trainings were going on, but it just did not succeed. So there are issues. It is an issue, but otherwise I'd come to Sir, the young woman, on the space of women in Baluchistan. Traditionally and historically, it's always, even within the household, it's women who are the decision makers. And I think not only maybe the Baloch society, but anywhere in Pakistan, if you find it, by the end of the day, it's the woman. Either it's the grandmother, the nani, dhadi, or the mother herself, or, there's somebody there by the end of the day who's making the decisions. Historically, we have women who have been fighting wars also, poets, and most of our documentation, and I would like to go back to the research issue, and why we do not have an authentic history of maybe Baloch, is because it's never been documented. But our history normally comes by recitations in poetry, different tribes. And that's how, it gets gathered together. And today, we do have the Baloch Academy, the Brahvi Academy, the Pashto Academy, who are actually documenting and putting it into, on paper in that sense. So, women have been, but education is a different issue. In spite of illiteracy, and very strongly within the tribes, as I said, and as Nahid very clearly and specifically sort of gave an answer to the issue of, quote unquote, the honor killing issue, that it does happen. It's not that it doesn't happen in Balochistan, but very rarely, and in specific parts. I've always said, let's study, map out. It's always, the honor killing issues normally are on the borders of Baluchistan, which borders Sindh and borders Punjab. And even Punjab bordering Baluchistan, Sindh bordering Baluchistan. You'd find that map where these incidents normally come out. Rightly or wrongly is another issue. It's a big debate when we go into the reasons, you know, that would take another whole day maybe to discuss. But then, myself, they always say that there's a woman behind a successful man. But I always say, it's a man behind a successful woman. It's always been my father, and I was lucky enough to get a very understanding husband, who's also the head of a very sort of a historical tribesman, as you would say. But education was how we went about making people understand that what education is all about. As I said, for me, my personal experience, I wasn't married when I started. In those days were really, I would say, within the home, very respectful. But no young girl, unmarried girl, even of the age of 12 and 13, was allowed to leave that boundary wall, if there was one. Many times it was just one room. A lot of resistance, Maulvis and otherwise, but it took us actually 3 years to actually get each and every girl of our village to come to that school. And that mobilization again was done from, maybe I was lucky enough coming from the Mir's family, where, you know, I had a lot of, again I would say, lot of scandals going around, but then the magnanimity of my father and his heart, where he would bear it all and just tell me, have the confidence, as long as you're doing the right thing, just go ahead. And it has changed. Today, attitudes, because of education, Makran is the most literate part of Baluchistan. Even pre-partition, we had education. We have had people going all the way to Deoband and to India for education. Rosbaksh Bizenjo and all, you know, all our elders. But we never had societal change. When women started getting literate and educated, the whole society has, you know, the minds have changed of people, of women in homes with their children, with their grandchildren. It's a different story. We may not have roads, we may not have electricity, but the awareness, literacy, and political awareness is a different story. It's to be seen, to be believed. That's what it is.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we have,
Apologies, very elementary questions.
okay, excuse me.
Two very elementary questions before the panel goes on. One is, what is the ratio between the Baloch and the Pakhtun population? And this Khalat assembly, did it have any Pathan representation? And was it elected or was it nominated by the Mir? Thank you, sorry.
Okay, I can just quickly sort of going through them. Well, first, Balot Saab, I didn't explain the whole history of Kalat. So, and also on the map, I just pointed out the area that was taken from Afghanistan, but not the other parts. And, you know, to reiterate, places like Quetta, Nushki, and Nasirabad were leased from Kalat by the British. So actually did not form British Balochistan in any case. So, you know, that's another added complication. I was just touching the surface there. And just to answer sort of the questions that were just raised, no, it was specifically towards Kalat, so it did not include parts of Balochistan that were Pakhtun dominated. So it did not have that many Pakhtuns. It had some Pakhtuns in it, but the Pakhtun belt was not officially at that time part of Kalat's state, so it didn't. And it was elected based on local jirgas. So the local jirgas nominated their people to go to these things. And the nature of local jirgas, it's pretty complicated to explain. But, you know, for that time, it was broadly representative to a great extent, I believe. And just to also talk about sort of the recent package, I think, you know, any package towards any region is good. But the fact of the matter is that now we are in the third phase of a Balochistan package. Something really is going wrong, that even after 3 packages, you know, nothing on the ground is actually changing. And every day you have men and women, for that matter, being lost, so to speak. what is actually happening there. So you can give them lots of money, but again, it goes back to honor. If you don't honor them and actually abduct them, whoever abducts them, let's put it that way. And the last bit, actually, just on the women's thing, I must say I'm in some ways very controversial towards that, because I think at some level you have to have some forced societal change. And I would just only end with the example of sati. If the British had not put it down our throats that that's wrong, it would have still been happening. So there are some things that I think the state, if it has to function and has to be effective, has to put down people's throats, which it should do not just in Baluchistan, in other parts of the country, to actually make people equal and jail people who do not treat their women properly. So I think, I would say that has to be forced to give the impetus for equality to actually come in.
I would like to thank everyone who has come to this panel, and to the panelists for this very enlightening discussion. And the objective is to understand and to be introduced, and also to inspire young people to do research about Balochistan, not from one single dimension, but from different dimensions, from different beauties and colors that Balochistan represents. Thank you very much.
Thank you.